Mr. Chairman. I wish to thank the organizer for having invited me on behalf of the National Museum of Natural History to this session in order to highlight the importance of ocean biodiversity and the promotion of research on it in order to implement marine policy, taking into account this very important component, and especially in the current context of global changes. So as already said, the ocean shows that our planet is blue, as seen from the space. The ocean covers more than 70% of the surface of our planet, and if we take into account its depth, it represents more than 96% of the volume of the biosphere. And the ocean is one. We talk of the ocean as a singular because of the connectivity of all the ocean. But we can consider it also as multiple, taking into account all the diversity of the ecosystems present in the ocean, from the polar regions to the equator, from the surface to the deep sea. And the ocean, with its unicity and diversity, is still very much unknown. The ocean was at the origin of life on Earth. The life appeared at least 3.7 billion years ago, and the most ancient fossils are these kind of stones, stromatolites, that are old 3.7 billion years. Here it's a specimen present in the gallery of the Museum of Natural History. And it is a structure made by microorganisms, kind of cyanobacteria. And remarkably, this kind of structure still exists today, can be seen in Australia. And from this first life not only originated in the ocean, but mostly evolved in the ocean for billion years. It's only at 0.5 billion years ago that life came out of the ocean. And during all this period, life evolved in the ocean. And so, in fact, most of the main phyla of life emerge in the ocean, as represented here, for instance, Spongia, Cnidaria, up to our ancestor, the Sarcopterygians that led to the human beings. So all this life diversified in the ocean, and some of these groups are still only present in the ocean. And the ocean, with all this biodiversity, has been for long, and is still a large resource for food for human beings and societies, so fisheries and then aquaculture. And its biodiversity is not only a resource for food, but it's a resource for many human goods and activities. It is biodiversity that can protect the coast from, we have mentioned before, hurricanes and tsunamis, by protecting through the coral reefs, for instance, and mangroves, protecting the coast and the human societies living there from these events. Ocean biodiversity is now more and more a resource for tourism and leisure, for observation of it, collecting of it. It's a very important factor for human culture and heritage, and as we'll develop further for research and development. And despite this huge biodiversity, all its importance, it's still largely unknown and represents today research frontiers. So to give some example, the biodiversity of the ocean, it's at the origin of many discoveries with their importance in basic science, basic knowledge, and also medicine. So from the very early Nobel Prize, for instance, in 1913 on anaphylactic shock discovered in Cnidaria, also ancient one discovered in Echinoderm, the first mechanism of immune defenses, to more recent Nobel Prize, for instance, in 2001, on the cell mechanisms of cell division with all the consequences in cancer research, again, thanks to echinoderms. And this is still going on. There's a lot of fields to be still discovered thanks to this very unique biodiversity of the ocean. All these special ocean species are also at the origin of many discoveries of bioactive molecules with, again, a lot of implication in medicine, from antibacterial, which is a very important issue today with the resistance to antibiotics. Discovering new molecules able to have this action is a critical issue, but antiviral, anti-cancer, and so on. And it's not only for molecules that the biodiversity is an important source of innovation, it's also what is called now more generally bio-inspiration, which means that developing innovation, getting inspiration from biodiversity, but not only molecules, but for instance, shapes. Here it's from the shape of the whale flipper, developing new turbines that are more aerodynamic, or developing new adhesives that are waterproof. And here, an example of developing new processes that are energy effective. For instance, diatoms are able to produce glass at low temperature and low pressure. So all this is just a starting field that is in full development. And despite all these possibilities offered by biodiversity, it is still very unknown, and research deals with exploration of this biodiversity. I will give you just a few examples. For instance, for plankton. Ocean plankton has a very important role in the function of our planet by producing 50% of the oxygen and by being the basis of all the food chains in the ocean itself. And recent expedition here from the Tara Foundation together with CNRS in France around the ocean devoted to the exploration of plankton led to the discovery of a huge diversity of microorganisms that was not at all known before, to show that there is still so much to know about the ocean. Same thing that has been mentioned during this day for deep sea. Exploration is just starting on the deep sea, leading to the discovery of two completely unexpected new species, including big specimens like holoturies and these yeti crabs with this very amazing shape. Same thing, another example is exploration of extreme environment like Antarctic Sea. Is leading again to discovery of new species, so new functioning ecosystems and new adaptations for physiological innovation. So altogether, this large diversity in the ocean is still largely unknown and requires research, international research, cooperative research to be more and more developed. And while it's still largely unknown, the threats on it are keeping increasing. Among these threats, one very classical one is the overexploitation of the resources by fisheries. Here it is the sad example of what happened to the cod in the Atlantic Ocean. Here, a century ago, the cod had very large population, including very big fish, here compared to a child, in the Atlantic that you would never ever see again. And overexploitation led to a complete collapse of the population. And this collapse is still not recovering because it impacted not only this very specific species, the cod, but the whole ecosystem, it was part of it. And this dramatic situation led now to the concept of having an ecosystemic approach of the regulation of fisheries in order to have sustainable fisheries taking into account the whole ecosystem. But the impact of human beings on the marine diversity is, of course, not at all only fisheries. It is, and more currently, habitat destruction, coastal artificialization, and pollution. So we hear a lot about plastic ending up in the ocean, but it's all pollution that end up ultimately in the ocean, including all chemicals. And among these chemicals, you have what is now called the endocrine disruptors. It's mostly investigated on terrestrial ecosystem, but it's impacting the marine ecosystem. And other pollution that are now starting more to be taken into account, like the noise, for instance, from the maritime traffic, and light, which is also now an important pollution factor in the ocean. And of course, the project of deep sea mining, which may impact ecosystems that are really unique, that may take millions of years to be developed, and that are still largely unknown and need to be explored, but in a knowledge perspective. And what is one of the main also factor affecting the ocean is, of course, the climate change. The effect of greenhouse due to the gas production. And as was mentioned before, until today, the recent investigation and highlighted by IPCC and the COP26 showed to the public and society that today the ocean has absorbed more than 90% of the temperature excess. It has also absorbed more than 30% of the CO2 excess. That means that if the ocean had not absorbed that, the current situation for us, human beings on Earth, would be much, much worse already than it is. But the ocean won't be able to absorb that at all forever. It has mitigated up till now the climate change, but this effect has impacted the ocean itself. The temperature of the ocean has raised, leading, was mentioned, to sea level rise and all the effect it has on the coast and the societies living near the coast, but also impacting directly all the organisms living in the ocean. Indeed, except birds and mammals, all the life in the ocean doesn't regulate its temperature, so it's directly affected by temperature changes. One famous impact is the bleaching of the coral reefs due to the increase of temperature, but increase of temperature affects all the physiology and development of the organisms, including shifting of migration of fishes and other species, important also for fisheries. And the other consequences of this mitigation effect of the ocean, the absorption of CO2, is the acidification of the ocean, which again impacts the physiology of organisms, in particular their ability to build their skeleton, to mineralize it, which can affect as well mollusks as larvae of fish. So the ocean has been mitigating the climate change, but it has impacted in its part ocean feature and its biodiversity. So the ocean and its biodiversity are still largely unknown and requires international collaborative research. It's submitted to new threats, and all that should be the basis of research frontiers. And this towards promoting research database policies in order to have a healthy ocean for its conservation and fair and sustainable uses of biodiversity. And us at the National Museum of Natural History, here it's the Gallery of Evolution, we are a national institution quite unique because our mission are research, conservation of collection, higher education, public outreach, and public outreach is a very important element for making policies, because the policies have to be understood and approved also by the public, expertise, and a direct participation into negotiation. In particular, my colleague, Denis Duclos, who is present here, is participating in negotiation, making a direct link between advances of research and negotiation. And just to illustrate some of the negotiation he participates in, is member of the French delegation. The museum is member of the French delegation for subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technology advice of the Convention for Biological Diversity, dealing mainly with marine and coastal biodiversity, ecologically or biologically significant marine areas for biodiversity, member of the French delegation for the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. Very few issues currently is BBNG. And also giving advices and being member of Scientific Council, the researcher and negotiator of the Museum of Natural History, contribute to OSPAR and Cécile Maire, the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Living Resources. They are part of the advisor and scientific council for all the projects on marine protected area, including a crucial issue of a project of an international protected marine area in the Antarctic. So I thank you very much for your attention.
고맙습니다.
Thank you.